Good evening, viewers. Welcome back to my channel, Literati. Please like and subscribe to my channel if you like the material which is uploaded here. Today is the 11th February 2023. Today marks exactly the 60th year of Sylvia Plath, the brilliant poet's death, who died by suicide on 11th February 1963. Sylvia Plath was a poet who is known because she was married to Ted Hughes. Apart from that, she was a very promising poet. Her life, which she took herself, was tragically cut short, ending a brilliant career. Her disturbed mental state has been the subject of a lot of speculation and a lot of study, giving rise to a controversial viewpoint which is known as the Sylvia Plath effect, which has been studied, or which has been coined by a psychologist called James C. Kaufman in 2001, where he makes a conjecture that women creative artists, particularly poets, because they are so sensitive, they feel things so deeply, they are so introspective, they have this tendency for nervous breakdowns, and they are more affected by their emotions, which lead to a kind of depression and a neurotic mental state. Sylvia Plath was undoubtedly a disturbed person. There were many reasons for that. She was a great creative genius. She had the finely tuned nature of a poet. She felt things very deeply. There were many aspects to her complex personality. Let us take a look at Sylvia Plath's biography in brief. She was born on 27th October 1932, born of a German father. Her mother was Aurelia Plath, her father was Otto Plath. Her father was an academic. He had a specialization in the study of bees. He was a man who left very complex feelings in Sylvia Plath. One of the reasons was his early death. He died when the poet was barely 8. And she could not know, or she did not know, what to make of him or how to understand him. This is the reason for many of her conflicts, mental conflicts, and which are present in this particular poem, Daddy, which we will discuss today. So Sylvia Plath was a born American, born on 27 October 1932. She committed suicide on 11th February 1963, so when she was only 30 years old. She, being a brilliant scholar, graduated from Smith College in 1955. She won a Fulbright scholarship to Cambridge, where she met Ted Hughes in England. Both of them married in 1956. Both of them great creative geniuses, because Ted Hughes is one of the greatest poets of the 20th century, along with Philip Larkin, as no doubt Sylvia Plath is also one of the most noted names in postmodern English poetry in the 20th century. The first book, Colossus, was published in 1960. The marriage with Ted Hughes soon led to separation, in spite of them having 2 children together. The various reasons were, of course, personal. Ted Hughes was a serial teacher, and there was a kind of perhaps a professional rivalry between them as well. But they separated, and in 1962, leading up to the early 1963, that is the winter years, the end of 1962, saw Sylvia Plath living alone in London, facing a very tough situation with 2 young children, very little money, and that particular year was one of the coldest in more than a century. So she was living under a lot of constraint, but this also saw the most fertile period of her life, where she wrote almost feverishly, almost as if she wanted to get away from her troubles. Finally, Everything became too much for her, and in her agony, she committed suicide on 11th February 1963. When Sylvia Plath was a student in the Smith College when she was 20, she had attempted suicide before, but that time she had been saved. But she writes very frankly about that episode in her life in her novel, The Bell Jar, which was published posthumously. The poems which she wrote during this period, Daddy being among them, were also published posthumously in a collection called Ariel. Her first book, Colossus, was published in 1960. This particular poem, Daddy, is a long poem, and it, like all modern poetry, has a fluidity of meanings. The same poet is very subjective. The same poet, Sylvia Plath, seems to speak in many different voices, which is again a trend of modern poetry. It is deeply subjective. She tries to deal with her feelings about her father. She calls this poem Daddy. So it is very straightforward, which is again a trend of modern poetry, writing in a straightforward style with very few frills in a very natural manner. And this is the style in which the best poets of the 20th century have written, like Philip Larkin and Ted Hughes. Another thing which is very prominent in the 20th century is the after effect of World War I and World War II. The entire great epic, The Wasteland, has been written in the aftermath of World War I. And even in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, the shadow of World War I and World War II looms over almost the entire English literature, poetry, as well as fiction. It is dealt with in different ways by different poets. Some of the poets talk about the situation, the mental state, the physical situation, and the consequences. Philip Larkin's father, he has also written a lot about the effects of war, and it seems that his father was one of those people who admired Hitler. Ted Hughes's father, also a World War I veteran, never spoke about his traumatic experience during World War I. Sylvia Plath, born in 1932, was obviously the generation who came after, or who came to maturity with the palpable effects of World War II, which ended in 1945. She views it through the persona of her father. Daddy is a poem which is, of course, about her father, but she tries to make herself come to a conclusion or to an understanding about who her father was. This poem is strikingly different in tone from her other poem, also written about her memories of her father, The Beekeeper's Daughter, in which the tone is tender and there is a very visual quality to it. Her father, being an academic and a beekeeper, was the most prominent things which she remembered about him. There was not much of personal interaction which she could recollect, being just a child, but she tries to gather her thoughts and gather her impressions about who and what her father was like, and what would their relationship have developed into had the relationship got enough time to mature, and she would have got a better chance to know her father. Daddy is a poem which is in 16 stanzas. It is full of conflicting emotions. The images of the starkness and the horror of World War II are present, of the Nazi Germany, because she suspects, when she looks back on certain memories, because as a child she was too small to understand everything, But now when she tries to piece her memories of her father together and those fragmentary recollections, some of his attitudes, he is an enigma to her. And she tries to make sense of what he was. She tries to make herself believe that he was not, being a German, he was not something which generally Germans had come to be synonymous with in the aftermath of World War II. She wants to believe that he was not a Nazi, that he did not have affinities with Hitler, that he was not a rabid anti-Jew, that he did not have any kind of support for the Holocaust. And the images, the stark images, the horrifying images are played throughout this poem, which is perfectly constructed in 16 stanzas. The perfection of the construction is at variance with the disturbed emotions, with the conflicting emotions which come to the poet. She is full of a mixture of love and hate. The perplexity does not leave her. She tries to come to terms with it. She tries to make sense of her feelings. And this struggle to understand who her father was has left a very deep disturbance in her mind, which is very clear in this poem. The poem is titled Daddy. She, like the style of the modern day poetry, it comes straight to the point. There is no beating about the bush. It is plain and straightforward. The attitude is sardonic. She says that I do not admire you, Daddy. I have never admired you, but I wish I could. I wish I knew who you were. I wish I knew for certainty that you were not a Nazi sympathizer. She says this feeling has been so secret in me that I have lived with it, not daring to articulate it. She has written this poem in the winter of 1962, just before she committed suicide. And it seems that all these feelings which she had stored up in her heart come tumbling out. In the first stanza, she says that it seemed that I enclosed myself in a shoe, not even daring to move, that is, not even daring to tamper with your memory, not even daring to touch it, not even daring to analyze it, not trying to look at it. You do not do any more black shoe, in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years, poor and white, barely daring to breathe or a shoe. 30 years, she was 30, and she says, now this is not enough, you do not do. I have to tackle this memory, I have to tackle this conflict, you do not do. I have almost forced myself to shut up this memory, like in a black shoe. I've lived in a black shoe, not daring to even stir it because it might give rise to so many different feelings. The second stanza, she says, Daddy, I have had to kill you. You died before I had time. She said, did not have enough time with you. You died. He physically died when she was just a child. And now all I remember of you is marble heavy like a god, because, people who are dead, they assume this kind of godlike persona where they're supposed to be venerated, where nobody is supposed to speak or question anything about them. They are supposed to be, anything wrong about them is considered sacrilegious. You treat them like some kind of a venerated godlike figure, like a marble statue, like someone who had been perfect, but that is not true, because I know that your toe sticks out or it is something which is not perfect about you. You are not perfect, and I wish to question that. And ahead in the freakish Atlantic, where uh, it pours, it pours green over blue, in the waters of beautiful Nauset. Nauset is the east coast of Massachusetts. I used to pray to recover you, Akdu. Akdu is a German term which means oh you. And in this stanza, the exasperation of the poet is very clear. Her sense of frustration, her anger, that she says, I wish I could recover you. I tried to make sense of you, but you were so remote. It was like your head was in the Atlantic and it was something remote. You were something totally beyond me. It was something which was larger than life. It was just an image. It was something which I could not touch. And in a frustration, she said, oh, you. This is a feeling of anger. In the German tongue, in the Polish town, scraped flat by the roller of wars, wars, wars. But the name of the town, it is common. My Polak friend, and her father was a German. He, during World War II, Poland was the first country which was invaded by the Nazi army, and they had flattened it, they overran it, they devastated it, and the entire Poland was ruined by the war. And any town would be like any other town, flattened, faceless, and completely demolished. And in your German town, because her father was a German, and she says, what does it matter what its name was? Because wars make all places like no man's place. It does not matter what they were. And my Polak friend, or you who had origins in Poland, says there are a dozen or two, but so I could never tell where you put your foot, your root. I never could talk to you. The tongue stuck in my jaw. And she says that I never got a chance to know you. I could never know anything about you, where you were from, where you had grown up, where your roots were. I could hardly speak because your language was not my language. When I was a child, I could not even speak in that guttural German language. My jaw struck, my tongue could not roll the words, and it seems to me when I hear those German words, it brings back the images of horror, of the concentration camps, of the genocide, of the inhumanity, of the wars, 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 the ugliest episode of the modern 20th century civilization, the immorality and the debasement of humanity, which was World War II, the sickness, and the images from the concentration camp seem to loom large. And the poet says there are a dozen or two, so I never could tell where you put your foot, your root. I never could talk to you. The tongue stuck in my jaw. And she says even the German language seemed to be something which was imbued with the memory of this horror. It stuck in a barbed wire snare. Ick, ick, ick. I could hardly speak. I thought every German was you, and the language obscene. And she says, as I grew up, and you were dead and gone, and I did not have enough memories of you. I did not know who you were, except the fact that you were my father, you were a German, you had come from Poland, you spoke German, which I could never speak because I was too small. But now when, in the aftermath of World War II, and when the world has been shattered by the moral sickness and the inhumanity, I thought every German was you, and Germans are the most hated people. German language seems to be full of horrifying images, almost obscene. When you hear and talk and listen to German being spoken, when you meet a German, immediately come the memories of the barbed wire fences. Those are references to the concentration camps. Because in World War II, the Jews were herded in these concentration camps where there were gas chambers, where there was a massacre, there was a situation which was too evil even to be imagined. So the horror and the evil of the barbed wire fences, of the concentration camps, of the innocent Jews or innocent men, women and children herded there, living in a horror which could not be described. So the barbed wire fences are a direct reference to the concentration camps. An engine, shoving me off like a Jew to Dachau, Auschwitz, Baden. I began to talk like a Jew. I think I may well be a Jew. And in this stanza, she recreates the images of the railway carriages. The Jews were deported, crammed in these railway carriages. The engine carried them over the landscape to these different destinations, which always ended in one concentration camp or the other. And there were so many of them. The most famous ones and the largest ones at Dachau, Auschwitz, and at Belsen. These concentration camps were killing camps, where hundreds and thousands of Jews were killed. An engine is the train engine which took these men, women and children crammed with just enough space to stand, old and young, in these airless carriages, railway carriages, which meandered over the landscape for hours, for days, till almost dead or half dead, these poor souls which had already lost their identity of being human beings were herded, were stripped, were stamped with a number, their identities as people erased, families separated, sent to gas chambers, brutalized, and sent to a world which was like a living nightmare, which was like a real hell. And Sylvia Plath says that in order to convince myself that I had nothing to do with whatever you might have been, though I was your daughter, I almost felt like a Jew. I wished I was a Jew. I wish I was anything but the daughter of a man who might have been a sympathizer of Nazism and Hitler. The snows of the Tyrol, the clear beer of Vienna are not very pure or true. With my gypsy ancestress and my weird luck and my tame pack, I may be a bit of a Jew. And the reference to Tyrol is a place of beauty in Austria, but there were concentration camps in Austria as well. So the beauty of Tyrol, the ski resort where it is a place of loveliness in the Alps, that is not true. That is a contradiction of the fact that Austria was a place where the Jews were persecuted and they were put in these concentration camps. With a Luftwaffe, your gobbledygoo, and your neat moustache, and your Aryan eye, bright blue, Panzerman, oh you. And here again, the stark images, the powerful images, the images which are replete or symbolic of the horror of World War II, Luftwaffe, the aircrafts, the fighter planes, the formation of those deadly planes which rained bombs, the German army, gobbledygoo, maybe a reference to the German language which seemed like something which was just a mixture of sounds to the poet. Neat mustache. It might be a reference to a father, it might be a reference to the image of Hitler. And your Aryan eye, bright blue, and the philosophy of Hitler, of being a pure Aryan, of being blonde, of having blue eyes, which her father no doubt was, merges with the image of Hitler. Panzer man, oh you. And again the same accusing words. Panzer man is the man, or it is a term which means those men, those army men who drove the army tanks. Oh you. Again that word, that exclamation in English this time, and which had appeared as Act 2 earlier, which signifies her anger, her frustration, her accusation, her helplessness at the thought. She wished that she knew him better. She wished that she knew that her father was not a Nazi, but she's afraid of the worst. And she says that all these years I've lived in a black shoe. I've not dared to question that image, which I have of you being someone who is already beyond me, whose head is in the Atlantic, who's untouchable, who's like a marble statue, because dead men are venerated. But now I wish, and I want to know, I want to question, I want to get answers. Not God, but a swastika, so black no sky could squeak through. Every woman adores a fascist, the boot in the face, the brute heart of a brute like you. And again, the reference to swastika, which is the Nazi emblem, and which had become the most dreaded emblem in the years of World War II. The emblem of swastika and the presence of the Nazis. She says the sky had become black with evil of the swastika, the flag flying the swastika. And this brute force was supposed to be an image of masculinity, an image of dominance, an image of superiority. And maybe women like to be dominated. They like to have this masculine power over them. And you were a brute, like all of them. You were a fascist, you were a Nazi, you were someone who was a German, and you had similarities, and you had affinities, and you had a support in your heart for Nazism, for rabid hatred for the Jewish, a belief in your Aryan superiority. You were just like Hitler. You stand at the blackboard, Daddy. In the picture I have of you, a cleft in your chin instead of your foot, but no less a devil for that. No, not any less the black man who bit my pretty red heart in two. And she tries to make sense of the images which she has, somehow trying to relate them to the man she knew, or the man she thinks he was. He was a mystery to her. He is an enigma, because she remembers him, maybe in a picture or maybe in her mind, as an academic who's standing at the blackboard, who is an intellectual, who is supposed to have an elevated mind and interests. And contradicting this image is the suspicion or almost certainty in her mind, though she was just a child. But now when she looks back and she sort of recollects everything, she tries to piece together everything, she is almost certain that he was a Nazi in his heart, a Nazi sympathizer, a supporter of Hitler. And she says, what do I make of you? You stand there in front of the blackboard. There's a cleft in your chin, which marks you as a devil. And she says, personally, you have wounded my emotions by dying so early when I was just a child. I was so innocent and you broke my heart. I was 10 when they buried you. At 20, I tried to die and get back to you. Back to you. I thought even the bones would do. But they pulled me out of the sack, out of the rack, out of the sack, and they stuck me together with glue. And here she talks about the first time she had attempted suicide when she was 20. She has somehow never reconciled with this feeling of loss, this feeling of betrayal. She feels betrayed by her father, not only because he has died early and leaving her uh, with a sense of being bereft, but also these conflicting images or memories which come back to her. She says that I wish I had known you, I had known what sort of person you were. And she said this feeling of an emptiness became so strong that I tried to commit suicide at the age of 20. She actually took a bottle of sleeping pills, but she was discovered in time and she revived. And so she says that that urge, that wish to be reunited to you once more, thinking that in my death, at least even what remained of you in your grave would be enough for me because I would be closer to you. But they pulled me back. They managed to rescue me and they stuck me together with glue. They tried to make me whole again. And then I knew what to do. I made a model of you, a man in black with a main camp look. And then she said, struggling with my emotions, I now knew what to do. I knew that the only way to get some peace was to create a final image of you. And this is the truth, or this is the conclusion I have come to. And this is that you were a man with a Mein Kampf look. Mein Kampf is the name of the autobiographical work by Hitler, which means my struggles, in which he has detailed his philosophy, his views, his rise to power, and what he believed in. It is a manifesto of his beliefs as well as his life. And it is the seminal work of Hitler. And this affinity, the poet says that I have come to this conclusion that you were a man with your idolization of Hitler. You were a Nazi. And a love of the rack and of the screw. And I said, I do. So, Daddy, I'm finally through. The black telephone's off at the root. The voices just can't worm through. And she says then, with a love for a rack and the screw, that means her marriage with Ted Hughes did not last. She was ravaged by her own feelings, her own emotions. And she could not, or they could not pull this through this marriage. And she said, I married him as I said, I do. They refer to the marriage vows. And it seemed that I had this love for the rack and the screw. The rack is some place of torture, and screw, that is, refers to a sense of being imprisoned. So she said, I had this self-destructive streak in me. Maybe I loved the idea of being tortured, and so I said, I do. That is, I married a man. So, Daddy, I'm finally through. The black telephone's off at the root, and the voice just can't worm through. And here it says that she almost ominously says that I'm finally done. I've decided what I have to do. And the black telephone is off the hook. That means that she doesn't want any calls to come through to distract her from what she intends to do. And so the voices can't get to her. If I've killed one man, I've killed two. The vampire who said he was you and drank my blood for a year, 7 years. If you want to know, Daddy, you can lie back now. And here the images of being tortured, the images of being, of suffering, of feeling a sense of loss, of going through a deep agony are very clear. And she says that she may be making a reference to her husband. She said it was like someone was sucking my blood, not for 1 year, but for 7 years. So it is first the image of her father, and then her marriage, her disturbed marriage to Ted Hughes, which finally take a toll on her when she is on the verge of a neurotic breakdown and a mental suffering which she cannot really go through much longer. And she says, Daddy, you can lie back now, because finally she says, I have stopped trying to analyze you and I can let you go. There's a stake in your far black heart, and the villagers never liked you. There's a stake in your fat black heart, and the villagers never liked you. They're dancing and stamping on you. They always knew it was you. Daddy, daddy, you bastard, I'm through. Now, in the last stanza, the image is of a vampire who is impaled by a stake, because according to the village superstition, if they find a vampire, the only way to annihilate it, the only way to kill it, is to drive a stake through its heart and impale it to the ground. And she compares her father to a blood-sucking vampire, and also the references to her suffering at the hands of her husband. And she says, now I know who the devil is, where it was. And I knew it was you. You have caused me so much pain, the memories which I have never been able to accept, my struggle to understand you. You're the fact that there is a sense of betrayal because you died so early. And now I can let you go, because now I understand that it was you. It was the men in my life who have caused me so much agony and so much pain. And the devil or the evil which has caused me so much sorrow is you, or that image can also be that of a husband. Sylvia Plath is a disturbed individual. This poem, Daddy, is a contrast to her poem, The Beekeeper's Daughter, where she looks at the world like a child, through a child's eyes, in a garden, the humming of the bees and the colors and the comforting presence of her father is, as he goes about his work, looking at the beehives, has a very quiet and a very peaceful tone in comparison to this poem of such disturbed emotions, such conflict, and though perfectly constructed in 16 stanzas, it is full of this undercurrent of hatred, of anger, of a sense of frustration, of helplessness, of a desire to understand her father, because she always felt, or the presence of father or the absence of her father had a deep impact on her mind. She was also not very on very cordial relationship with her mother, because she has said once that she hates her She said, I hate her, I hate her, I hate her. There's such an intensity of emotions, and it is almost unnerving. And the torture which she experiences or she faces or she expresses in this long poem, Daddy, is very visible. It is a disturbing poem because of the images of the concentration camps, the Nazi Germany, which the horror of Second World War, which looms over this entire poem. The reference to the Luftwaffe, the swastika, the grey sky, the names of Auschwitz and Dachau, and the image of Hitler merging with her, the image of her own father, her trying to make sense of what she should believe about her father. Sylvia Plath has said once, she had said, quotation, I shut my eyes and all the world drops dead, semicolon, I lift my eyes and all is born again, quotation. This statement or this quotation tells us very clearly that she views the world very subjectively. She looks at the world in a very introspective manner. She tries to understand it, and she is not able to, because even the end of this long poem, she says, I can let you go, Daddy. But it is not a letting go which has any sense of tranquility about it. Even the last image of the last stanza is a violent one. That is of quelling the devil, of trying to annihilate it. But the presence is very, very palpable. Sylvia Plath and other poets of the 20th century, particularly the poets or the literature which was written after World War II in the 1940s, 50s and 60s, known as the postmodern era of English literature, makes these constant references to the two catastrophic events of the 20th century which changed the world forever, and that was World War I and World War II. Daddy, the poem which talks about Sylvia Plath's conflicting feelings about her father, her mixture of hatred, anger, and perplexity, because she is trying to find the truth about her father. What she sees or what she remembers does not give her any sense of peace. In fact, it drives her to a point where she wants to renounce her relationship by becoming a Jew, because he was a rabid Jew hater. But it is something which she has to live with, adding to the torment of her young life. And sadly, she committed suicide on 11th February 1963. So, a gifted poet, a tortured soul, too young to die, a tragic end to a very promising career. Sylvia Plath is one of the most impressive women poets of the 20th century. And this lecture is dedicated to her memory. Thank you.